Hey guys, me Sam Stein, managing editor of Bulwark. I'm here with Saletan and Andrew Egger. We're going to talk about what was just completed Fox News interview with Kamala Harris, her first time on Fox. Shockingly, I guess it's been what 5-6 years in the public life, elected official in DC, never on Fox before. Anyways, she went on 3 weeks before an election, which was a bold gambit. It was about 30 minutes of contentious back and forth with host Bret Baier. Before we get into the specifics, let's just start generally. Andrew, how'd she do?
So, Sam, you and me were on yesterday, or maybe the day before, with our colleague A.B. Stoddard, and when this news broke that she was going to do this interview, and her take was, why? What's the upside here? You know, Bret Baier is going to be a total predator, not a predator, it's not the right word. He's a Terminator, let's say that. He's a true pro. He will go after you. He has no obligation to be balanced, just kind of fair and cordial and everything. And that's exactly what we saw, right? I mean, it was one long hit parade of 2019 Kamala stances versus current day Kamala stances. Every single position she's ever taken that would be mildly objectionable to a Fox News viewer, which is of course it was going to be that. And I mean, she did as well as she could have done under the circumstances, but these are questions with no good answers, right? I mean, she has flip-flopped on a bunch of stuff without providing much of an explanation beyond the explanation that we all know is true, but she can't say, which is that the previous Kamala was the Kamala who was trying to win a Democratic primary with a bunch of really left-wing candidates and trying to stand out among a field of 20 of them. And the current Kamala is trying to win a national election for president of the United States. And so she's tacking more to the center now. And that's correct and true, and everybody does it. But you can't say it to Bret Baier because, you have to be honest, and you have to everything you ever said has to be a deeply held belief. So I mean, I think she did fine. She didn't crumble under the pressure, which is what I think a lot of people were worried she might, just because it was like we said, it was a new type of thing. I mean, she has not done these really hostile interviews, and she didn't know which directions he was going to go in. She was very well prepped. She was ready to pivot to her points when she wanted to. She got in some good zingers at Trump, and she got in her talking about her policy.
Yeah, we will get into those.
Yeah.
Will, what do you think? Is Andrew's assessment about right?
Yeah, I'm more favorable in my assessment of this interview for a couple of reasons. One, you got to remember that Donald Trump has been out on the campaign trail telling, and the Fox News, commentariat has been behind this. The message is Kamala Harris is dumb. She's stupid. She can't talk. So the expectations were extremely low. She gained just by showing people actually she's, intelligent, articulate, and can stand actually more so than Trump. But passing that bar. The second thing is you got to remember that she just did yesterday she did Charlemagne, right? She did Breakfast Club yesterday. Yeah. And there she's speaking not to conservatives. She's targeting an audience of black men. She's being interviewed by a black man. And that interview also, that's a guy basically saying, here's a bunch of stuff that's been said about you by the opposition. And he's teeing it up for her to respond to. That's all gravy for her to win back some of those people. So she was doing that again, this time with the Fox audience. Obviously the interviewer was more hostile in the sense of he was really trying to drive the message on the other side. But I just think it's all gains for her, given how bad the perception of her was in that community.
I got to agree sort of with Will said there. I mean, I think a lot of us are sort of hyper online, and so we can score this point by point. I think the vast majority of people who are actually watching this stuff don't follow it that closely and have a caricature of her, which is almost cartoonish, right? And this is my big thing about why I think Democrats should go on Fox News all the time, basically. The only way to defeat these characterizations is to actually present yourself. And even if you get dinged up in the process, for the vast majority of people, they actually start to look at you almost more like a human and not a political figure. And I think that's the goal here for her is can I just come across to people as not a dummy, as not a Marxist, as someone who has independent thought and who can speak? I think her problem is she's doing this 3 weeks before an election, but that's the hand she was dealt. On the specifics, Andrew, I'm going to go through my points and then you tell me where I'm wrong. I thought the immigration stuff was just, it was expectedly brutal, right? It was just 10 to 12 minutes straight of this person's family was killed by a migrant. What do you say to this person? And how could you do this? And why did you do the border stuff only in year 3 of your presidency? And the border union hates your guts and all the stuff that you expect. And it was really difficult for her to get a word in edgewise because Bret was just sort of pounding her. I thought the good moments for her were twofold. One was he teed this up almost for her. You know, how would you differ from Biden? And she actually got to do that. She actually got to answer the question. She didn't say anything really specific, right? But she did say, I'm not going to be Joe Biden. And I think that was important for her. And then I think the third part, which is funny because everyone in the conservative universe thought this was her kind of losing her emotions. But I thought it was the best part for her, which was when she really ripped into Trump. And you could see that she was getting angry with the enemies within stuff. And so for me, that was like the worst, the middle, and the best. Why am I wrong?
Yeah, I think your assessment of kind of the good, the bad, and the ugly there is all pretty much spot on. And the reason why the answer where she kind of got animated, she kind of got her thunderbrow and like was able to lay into Donald Trump a little bit. It was so effective because Bret had her on the back foot for so much of the interview, right? He was picking all of her worst spots everywhere where she was going to have to like scramble a little and dissemble a little and make it harder for her to just kind of come across as personable because she had to spin in order to make any answer at all. But on that particular thing, when they kind of went to Trump talking about the enemy within, Bret played a clip that was kind of dishonest from the Fox rally today. I mean, it really mischaracterized where Donald Trump has been in talking about his opponents there. And that created a lane for her, and she did not miss it. She really plunged in the knife and said, look, you guys did not characterize the way he's been talking about this.
I missed that. What did he actually say at the rally, and what did Bret suggest he said?
So basically what happened was over the weekend, he was doing one of these interviews where he was talking about, we have all these foreign adversaries. But really what I'm most worried about is the enemy from within, all these sickos and Marxists and communists and people like Adam Schiff. So it was like he did the enemy within thing. He also said, we might have to be able to like sick the military on them. And then he explicitly connected that to political.
And what did Bret play?
Bret played a clip from today from a Fox News town hall where Harris Faulkner, who was interviewing Trump, kind of offered him an opportunity to halfway clean that up.
Gotcha.
And he kind of said some things like, of course, I'm not talking about political violence. But then he goes right back into doing the same things again, where he's talking about how the enemy within is the Pelosi's this time. And like they're really sick people, all that stuff.
She got heated in that moment.
He's the one who talks about an enemy within, an enemy within, talking about the American people, suggesting he would turn the American military on the American people.
We asked that question to the former president today. Harris Faulkner had a town hall, and this is how he responded.
I heard about that. They were saying I was like threatening. I'm not threatening anybody. They're the ones doing the threatening. They do phony investigations. I've been investigated more than Alphonse Capone. He was the greatest gangster. No, it's true. No, but think of it. It's called weaponization of government. It's a terrible thing.
So,
Bret, I'm sorry, and with all due respect, that clip was not what he has been saying about the enemy within that he has repeated when he's speaking about the American people. That's not what you just showed.
Well, he was asked about that specific...
No, that's not what you just showed. In all fairness and respect to you...
I'm telling you that was the question that we asked him.
You didn't show that, and here's the bottom line. He has repeated it many times, and you and I both know that. And you and I both know that he has talked about turning the American military on the American people. He has talked about going after people who are engaged in peaceful protest. He has talked about locking people up because they disagree with him. This is a democracy. And in a democracy, the President of the United States, in the United States of America, should be willing to be able to handle criticism without saying he'd lock people up for doing it. And this is what is at stake, which is why you have someone like the former chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff saying what Mark Milley has said about Donald Trump being a threat to the United States of America.
Yeah, and I think like she was correct. I mean, she was righteous in that moment, and she, like I said, she didn't miss it, and she got to make her direct case again. And you kind of see from after that, Bret was almost kind of like trying to say, well, would you please stop talking about Donald Trump quite so much? Because she kind of got in her bag a little bit and was rolling. I think like if you're looking for little wins in a hostile territory, that was about as good as you could have gotten.
Were there individual wins, or was this overall sort of in the macro sense? She needs to go on the show and just
no. I think there were some individual wins. So let me talk about a couple of things. One is about Fox, and the other is about her. Let me say two things about Fox. One is that moment that you guys are talking about. that is an example, that is an illustration of the difference between the bias of Fox News and the bias of the left-leaning mainstream media, whatever you want to call it.
For sure.
They did not, what Andrew said is exactly right. They did not play the clip of what Trump said about targeting the enemy with the military. They played the clip of Trump's cleanup job, right? That is a thing that I don't think you would see, the NBC, CBS, ABC doing. That was very misleading. Even though it's Bret Baier and I think he's the best guy on Fox, that was very unfair. The other thing is, guys, tell me if I'm wrong about this. This interview went for half an hour. Was there a question about the economy? I mean, it was border. Are you different from Biden? There's a bunch of stuff she brought up, her economic plans. But I don't.
I think he asked her once, why do voters trust Donald Trump more?
Yes, that's what it was. Which is,
that was just on voter perceptions,
and that was pretty late in the interview. Was my recollection. Like that, it's really weird to me that they don't. So they're like starting. That's not a cultural war issue. I mean, the border is a real issue, but I found that quite sort of a kind of shocking omission on their part. But let me come back to Harris for a couple of things. Good moments. One of them was. He asked, are you different from Biden? We all know that she whiffed on this with The View, right? So she starts off, she says, well, I'm not a continuation of Biden. At that point, guys, I've got my hands over my head. I'm like, oh my God, please name an issue. Don't say you're not a continuation, and then she goes in and she actually hits that right to the outside the third baseman down the line. It was great. It was, I'm going to have Republicans in my administration. I'm going to be turning to the business sector. That was a big, sweet kiss to the center right. A great message for the Fox audience, especially people who have the misimpression that Joe Biden is some kind of left-wing nut. If they believe that, she's saying, I'm not going to be that. Let them infer that it's different. The other good moment, I thought, he says to her, are you saying that people who disagree with you are stupid? He's setting her up with the deplorables thing. Yeah,
that was the easiest bait to spot in the world. Everyone's like, what's she going to say? Yeah, they're dumb idiots. I mean, come on.
But I liked her pivot there, Sam. I liked when she basically said, oh, I don't talk that way, but Donald Trump does.
Yes, that was fun.
I got to tell you, I watch all the Trump rallies. That is totally Donald Trump. Stupid, dumb, idiot. That is Donald Trump's language. So I'm glad that she said not only that she doesn't do it, but that he does.
Yeah, no, to that point, I've been kind of perplexed this last couple of days as Donald Trump has gone to these events and just absolutely trashed Detroit. It's like if a Democratic politician were ever to speak of like a Republican locale in that way, it would be like career ending, right? Can you imagine if Kamala Harris went up there and be like, man, Mississippi really is a shithole. like people would be like, what are you talking about? Like, how could you say that? No, I thought she was fine. And then more or less, I thought that by the end she had, she was just talking over him more. She seemed to have her footing more. I thought the most interesting thing, and again, everyone's viewing this through their partisan lens, the most interesting thing to me happened right after it was done, which is they go to their panel on Fox, and Dana Perino's there, and she's a Republican, and she's a panelist, and she, she's not obviously been following it point by point on Twitter. And they're like, how do you think she did? And her response was more or less like ours. She was like, well, she had some really rough moments, but then I think she had some pretty good moments.
At times, especially when she was trying to go after Donald Trump, she was fairly effective in that to try to get her point of view across.
I was like, okay, so the Fox viewer who isn't on Twitter probably is watching that and is like, oh, wow, okay. So there is like a sensible interpretation of this. Now, I don't know what they spin this out of, but we'll see what happens. How do you see the campaign playing this one in the next couple hours, Andrew?
Well, so, I mean, they will absolutely allude to the moment that we have already kind of discussed at length, Fox kind of covering for Trump and her really hitting them on it. I think the more interesting question is, like, what comes in the next couple days? Because we talked about this the other day. Bret Baier on Fox is, like, about the most hostile, like, highest stakes interview she could possibly have done, because he's going to hit her just as hard as anybody else, but he's going to be more disciplined and better at it, because he kind of comes across as reasonable and a little bit centristy in his demeanor. And so, like, if this is the only interview like this she does, I think that would be a big mistake. I mean, I think that she came out of this as good as she could have. They have to look at that. They have to say, okay, this went fine for us, and they should take some more swings. I've been yelling this from the rooftops. She should go on Joe Rogan. You know, she should talk to some dumber right-wing guys who will be willing to have her on, and who will be willing to have, you know, more of like a long-form conversation. She can do it. Like this is proof of concept that she can go into the hostile interview and do the hostile interview and come out fine. I mean, I think we'd all agree it shows she probably should have been doing it all along. But at the very least, you know, do a couple more of these between now and Election Day. Can't hurt.
Yeah. What do you think, Will? I mean, the other thing to think about is like, put Biden in that situation. I think it would have gone a lot worse. Put Trump in that chair, it would have been different. He would have just like thrown a bunch of weaves at us. But like, the big criticism of Harris was that she probably could not handle herself in these spots. I think she did okay enough to alleviate that criticism, at least.
Yeah, I agree. Look, let's all cast ourselves back to the Biden era when Biden was the candidate, and remember what it was like to cringe every time Biden appeared. Like, is he going to? Can he?
It wasn't a cringe. I was holding my breath.
So forgive me for going to sports for a minute, but we've all had the experience. There's the experience of rooting for a team or an athlete where you're just like, you cringe, you go look at the wall, you don't have any confidence. You're waiting for your quarterback to throw a pick or whatever it is. You're waiting for the batter to whiff or whatever. And that is so painful. And what it was useful here was to see that Kamala is not Joe. Kamala is competent. Kamala can handle herself. She took the best punch. She was up against the great reliever here. You know, she held her own. And so I just think that should calm the bedwetters. And I fully agree with Andrew. Like, just take this as license to be confident in her, to have her go out and take more risks, because it turns out she can handle it and she doesn't screw it up.
She should call into Fox and Friends tomorrow morning. That's my pitch. All right. It's not the worst idea.
They're more nakedly partisan, and they're not as smart and agile as Bret. Like there's no downside now that she's done this to doing any of those, because she's already taken all those hard questions, right? I mean, like, there's what is the downside of her going on Hannity now? I was talking to Jesse Waters.
You say that, but there were some things that Bret left on the table here. Okay. I was surprised he didn't, for instance, he did not ask her about the plagiarism scandal that's happening in right-wing media right now. I'm surprised he didn't ask her about Doug and some of the Daily Mail articles that are out there right now. I mean, those are two things those are two things that would have not surprised me had they come up. But, you know, I did expect him to go really heavy on the immigration stuff, and he did. And we all expected transgender stuff, though.
Sam, isn't it sad that, like, we think it's surprising that the interviewer focused on policy? Like, that he didn't grab for the nearest crazy scandal going on right-wing Twitter?
Will, welcome to the fucking world, man. Yes, it's sad. The whole world is sad. Obviously it's sad. Oh, man. All right. Well, listen, this was a good, healthy recap. The viewer won't see it. It was interrupted at various points by screaming children in the backdrop, but we have a great editor helping us out here. Actually, if you're watching this, I encourage you to leave your thoughts on how you think Kamala did on Fox News today, and we would love to see him. And of course, subscribe to our YouTube channel so that we can keep entertaining viewers like you. Thanks a lot, guys.